Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Josh and welcome to Not in the Archives. Here we have the motherboard that the 2004 machine would have been based around, a DFI LanParty N44 SLI-DR, which we'll be looking at today. This board is packed full of modern or high-end features. Well, I want to say modern, but some of these have been around for quite a while, but mostly only on higher-end hardware configurations. I'll power it up briefly and show you what I mean. Okay. Power LED, which I'll go more into in a minute. Post LEDs. Let me just put a GPU in there. There we go. Front LED number 1 is blinking. Oh, stop blinking. Yeah, this board doesn't work properly. Let me actually grab some different memory that I know works in this motherboard, and we will just rearrange some things. And that should be it. I guess that's an all okay post message then, rather than a video card error. And yes, changing the memory to stuff that, because the original stuff, I mean, it works, but not all the time. So more about this board and why I wanted to put it in the 2004 machine. Well, it's because of its layout. Power it off and unplug the power supply. Let's take the graphics card out just for the moment. It's got a back plate, so it'll be fine to just rest it on top of the power supply. It's because of the layout. If someone showed you this without any sort of pre-judgment and said, try and guess what this is from, without giving it the best look, you'd probably think it was relatively modern. I mean, 8 SATA ports, PCI Express, it's probably got to be quite new. I mean, sure, there were motherboards that were a lot newer. For example, this Gigabyte 790X motherboard that have floppy disk and IDE controllers. And this one has 2 IDE controllers and 1 floppy controller. So you'd think, surely it can't be that old with the feature set that it has. I mean, again, comparing it to the Gigabyte 790X motherboard, 2 PCI Express 16 slots, some PCI Express 1, and I think that's got a PCI Express 4 connector. Like, it doesn't look that dissimilar to something like that, except it's got DDR1 memory, which makes it a bit of a pain, but it is quite modern, especially with the features that it has. One of which is pretty obvious, is the Param reset switches. These things you really only see on very high-end boards. The only board that I have that has it is my X58 motherboard, which is also a Gigabyte motherboard, GA-X58UD5. Revision 1, I would have preferred to get a revision 2, but I've only seen one and someone like 350 for it, which is ridiculous. Obviously didn't pay anywhere near that for my one, but that has a power and reset button on the motherboard. Another modern feature is the power indicator LED. I have got a couple boards that have this, such as the aforementioned X58 motherboard, which has it built into the power button, which is quite nice. It glows blue when power is applied. This old 965 Intel 965 board, which the Asus logo glows blue when it's on standby and glows red when it's powered, which is also pretty cool. And the motherboard in my main PC, which has like an RGB logo in the top corner, which I set to blue, but for some reason it keeps forgetting the profile and goes through the sort of fading colours thing. Another more modern feature of this, which is also which is actually similar to my which is kind of halfway between the X58 motherboard and my motherboard, is the 4 LEDs in the 4 post LEDs in the corner. And it also has a built-in speaker, which is also quite useful. And you can turn it off. There's a jumper there, and use an external speaker, which is very helpful. I wish more motherboards did that, had a built-in one. But if we just put in the graphics card real quick, and move the motherboard a sec, get that in there. This is a 7800 GTX. I'd like to get 2 6800 Ultras in here, which would be more appropriate for 2004, but they're actually more difficult to find, sorry, more expensive than this board. This board was difficult to find, but it wasn't expensive. And that's why I'm so annoyed about it, because I've been looking for one of these for ages, and the first time I came across one, it didn't work. So, yeah, it has the indicators. There's 4 of them. I believe the first one is for CPU, second one's for memory, third one's for graphics, and the last one is just the A-OK, everything worked, which is the same as my motherboard. It's got 4 colours, I believe: orange, red, white, and green. I believe orange and red, I can't remember which one's which, but that's CPU memory. I think red might be memory, although I'm not too sure. But I know that green is for everything's good and white is for graphics. And it has, I don't know if it's got 4 LEDs or if it's got just the one, but it's a multicolored LED. But it does the same sort of thing. And then it's kind of like the 7-segment postcode in my X58 motherboard. Another thing I like about the board, and I've touched on it briefly, was its layout. I mean, I've only seen a couple other motherboards with a similar CPU memory, VRMs, PCI slot layout. And that is having the 24-pin and 4-pin, or 8-pin if it was a more modern motherboard, placed here for convenience, with the VRMs here and the memory horizontally rather than vertically that you'd have in a regular motherboard. Also where the CPU sits above the PCI Express slot for better communication. Shorter traces mean that the electrons can path much faster at a high frequency, although this board wouldn't be able to support the higher frequencies that modern boards would, with like PCI Express Gen 4. This is only PCI Express Gen 1. I mean, PCI Express Gen 5 is coming out soon with Intel's new boards, and DDR5 and whatnot. But yeah, this is a pretty modern, like I think it's on some high-end EVGA boards that I've seen this on. Very uncommon layout, but it's a very good layout, very efficient layout. Better overclocking and stability, etc. Another thing, and this is if we dim the lights, is this board's party piece, as UXW Bill would put it. If I grab my trusty old bench power supply and hook it up to a short wavelength LED, power it up, all the slots on the board, and I really need to make a flashlight using this. Turn the current down. It's still a bit too bright. Okay, that's about as far as it can go. I'll be able to see that the PCI Express slots, memory slots, and whatnot, they actually glow. Yeah, this is not the best LED. It's near ultraviolet. It's high frequency stuff, but it's not. Like, this is much better in person, I'll be honest. You can see all of the slots are glowing. If I turn the light on, the effect should just go back to normal. It sort of does. But yeah, it glows. This beats the hell out of RGB. This is such a cool effect, and one of the reasons I absolutely love this board. But also, it doesn't work. The board's just dead. It's got all these modern features, multi-GPU, I mean, that's kind of outdated now, but whatever. All these modern features. It's even got, I think it even has BIOS backup, which, sure, it's not as good as like a Gigabyte dual BIOS, but it has at least a way of saving your BIOS, and yeah, such a cool effect. So yeah, it's a massive shame that this just does not work. I'd love for it to work. I mean, the CPU in it is actually half decent, for for an early Athlon 64. It's a 3000 plus, I think, which is single core, not too great, 2 gigs of RAM, but the system doesn't work. I'm gonna have to send it back and hope that I can find one of these in working order, hopefully with the actual yellow CPU mount retention thing, which I actually had to change a good one on there because the one that originally came with it was bad and didn't even have a backplate. This is my backplate. I had to cut a hole so it wouldn't interfere with all the SMDs on the back. Otherwise it would have chipped and broken them, which wouldn't have done anything because the board doesn't, which, even if they did get broken, it wouldn't do much for the board. The board's already dead. It's a very big shame because I was hoping to put this in the 2004 machine and do some web browsing, 2004 style web browsing, Windows XP, other stuff. I mean, it has dual gigabit LAN. Actually, I haven't touched on the rear I/O. This is the rear I/O. For 2004, this is incredibly good. SPDIF in and out, surround sound, 6 USB 2 ports, which I'm sure it's not USB 3, Firewire 400, pretty good, dual Ethernet. Oh, and yeah, the audio can be upgraded using this little daughter board, and one of the other things, it should have a sort of retention thing that goes around, sort of, it sits, like a plastic clip that sits on there, so you can put it in its slot and it won't wobble around, but that was missing. Lots of things were missing for this. The one thing that was actually a great feature of this was the debug port. It would basically take these 4 LEDs, the post LEDs, and put them on the front of the case using a 5 1/4 inch drive. But yeah, this is missing from this. It also would have included Firewire 400 and I think also SPDIF, which would be such a cool feature. I'll put a picture of UXW Bill's one, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if he still has that machine. I'd love to get my hands on that machine because same motherboard. It is the SLI one because I know because of all these jumpers, and it has it's not actually silk screened on. That's actually a sticker. I thought it was silk screened, but it's not. It's actually, you can probably see the green in the eye of the SLI logo. It's not silk screen. This is actually a sticker. Don't really want to peel it off, although I kind of, I might end up doing that. But no, this is such a nice motherboard for the time, and it's such a sad sight to see that it does not work. There's so many things you could do with this. Testing, I wanted to put PCI Express NVMe drive in the 4X slot and see if I could boot Windows XP on it. I wanted to do put a brand new graphics card in here, test bottlenecks. I wanted to do, of course, retro SLI. I wanted to do a sort of a server using all of these, sort of a network attached storage using all of the SATA ports on the board. Put 4 gigs of memory in it, get it maxed to the 9, see if I could find an FX60 or equivalent. I think it's an Opteron 980 or 850, whatever. Anyway, I think it's Opteron 840. Something dual core that could go in here. Try and max this out to the 9s. Make this absolutely badass. I would have put this in the original silver Thermaltake armor case, which looks really good. Don't know what power supply I would have put in, but that's sort of up to whatever I find. Probably some 600 watt unit. That might be a bit overkill. But yeah, I really wanted to get this motherboard working. Well, I really wanted to get a working motherboard that I could use to do a bunch of stuff with. This was my dream old motherboard. Like, anything before this is AGP, which is unreliable, although, I mean, it actually depends on user error. Usually it's users who break AGP motherboards. But I have had other motherboards that are older that just weren't that reliable. I had one that the chipset exploded on, which was funny. I still have that board. It still kind of works, but it's not great. But yeah, anything older than this is just, you can't get AGP graphics cards. Whereas if you wanted to use this and you couldn't find I don't know, 1600 Ultra because people want way too much for them, just whack a GT710 in there. It will perform the same. Yes, it won't be the exact same experience, but it will be I don't know, quieter, more power efficient, even though, yes, I'd rather have a 1600 Ultra than a GT710. GT710s suck. But you get the picture. I love this motherboard. I wish it worked. I want to find one that works. I'm kind of depressed about this. But yeah, so that's sort of the end of the story. Motherboard doesn't work. Yada, yada, yada. Wish I had one that worked. Wish one had that did work. so that I could use it in my 2004 project PC. End of story. See you in the next one.